Welcome to Dialogue. We are diving deep into a topic today that has quietly but completely changed how we see ourselves and each other.
It really has.
Just think about the phone in your pocket. It's not just a camera anymore, is it? It's become this instant optimization engine.
It's a digital makeup kit, a
Yep.
real-time plastic surgeon. It's all of those things rolled into one.
And we're at this unique moment in history where technology, we're talking AI, filters, these augmentation apps, can instantly refine a face, reshape a body, and basically erase any sign of, being a real human.
That's the core of it. The untouched, unaltered human face is becoming something of a rarity online.
A genuine artifact.
It is. If you just scroll through your social feed right now, what you're seeing, more often than not, isn't reality. It's an idealized version of reality, sculpted by machine learning.
And that shift where digital perfection becomes the default, where our natural self is seen as the before picture, that's what we're exploring. We're calling it the era of digital dishonesty.
It's so much more than a photo editing trend. It's fundamentally changing how we define our self-worth, how we date, how we form communities.
So our mission with this deep dive is to really pull back the curtain on this. We want to look at the technology that makes it possible, the psychological cost it takes from us, and what it all means for us as people living in this, in this new reality.
We need to understand the hidden price of accepting these tools as just a normal part of life.
Okay, let's get into it. To start, I think we have to define what we actually mean when we say digital dishonesty. It's a pretty loaded term.
It is. And the first thing to get straight is that this isn't always about someone consciously trying to deceive people.
Yeah.
It's rarely that simple.
It's not about malice.
No, not usually.
Mm.
The phenomenon is so much more insidious because it's often unconscious. It's this subtle, almost automatic reshaping of yourself to meet these digital expectations of flawlessness that we've all somehow internalized.
So we're not talking about the big, dramatic Photoshop scandals you see in the news. We're talking about the millions of tiny daily adjustments that have become normal.
Exactly. We're talking about the subtle things that have gone from being specialized tools to just a standard one-tap function on every platform. Things like filters that don't just change the light, but actually slim your face a little.
Right, they reduce cheek volume or narrow the jawline.
Or AI tools that subtly tweak the symmetry of your bone structure, making your nose a bit narrower, raising your brow arch. It's all done in a way that's aesthetically pleasing, but it's fundamentally not real.
And the specifics of what they target are so telling.
There are apps that make your eyes or lips just a little bigger, just enough to hit some kind of subconscious beauty trigger.
And the skin smoothing, it's on another level now.
It's not just blurring. It's meticulously removing every single pore, every fine line, every shadow. It's an erasure of human texture. It's like a digital veneer that eliminates any proof that you actually exist in the real world with real light and real skin.
And we can't forget the body editing, especially now with video.
Oh, absolutely. The sophistication there is almost alarming because it's happening in real time. You have tools that can lift, tighten, narrow your waist, change your proportions while you're literally recording a video.
All these little adjustments, they just pile up.
They do, and they all push us towards this one standard of symmetry and flawlessness that, frankly, no human being naturally possesses. And this is the crucial point. The dishonesty isn't in the tech itself. It's in the psychological message it sends.
Which is what?
That the unedited you, your real self, is somehow deficient. That it's unacceptable or less worthy without this digital intervention.
And that's where the problem moves from what other people see to what you think about yourself.
That's exactly where the psychological damage starts. This whole process creates a massive gap, a chasm, really, that we call identity distortion. It's this growing, stressful divide between the curated self you present online, your avatar self, and the raw, messy self you actually are day to day, your real self.
And having to juggle those two identities must create a huge amount of internal friction. What happens when that gap just gets too wide to manage?
It leads directly to some pretty serious emotional tension.
Yeah.
You see it manifest as this deep-seated insecurity, a lot of shame around your natural appearance, and a really fragile sense of self-worth.
A self-worth that depends on how well your avatar is performing.
Totally conditional. You spend so much mental energy just policing that border between the two versions of you, terrified the real one might slip out. And here's the core conflict that makes the whole cycle spin faster. You, the individual, after creating this perfect digital avatar, start comparing your real, imperfect self to your own creation.
So you're in a battle with an illusion that you built.
Yes, You're chasing a standard you fabricated, which
Right.
sets up this impossible endless loop of inadequacy. You can never win.
The idea that your harshest critic is your own filtered selfie. That is really unsettling. It's a treadmill you can't get off of, which makes it so important to understand the actual machinery behind this. Let's dig into that, the engineering of perfection.
The change in the technology, even in just the last 5 or 10 years, is just, it's exponential.
I mean, when most of us first started using social media, filters were so simple, they were just aesthetic overlays, right? A color gradient, maybe a soft glow.
They were static. They were basically just a layer on top of the image.
Exactly. But the tools we have now are in a completely different universe. They're built on advanced machine learning. They aren't just blurring pixels. They are actively recognizing, analyzing, and then reconstructing your face in real time. This is some seriously deep tech working on the surface of your identity.
And this is where the data gets really interesting. The sophistication of these tools is built on this incredibly granular analysis. Modern systems can detect and map somewhere between 50 and 70 distinct facial landmarks.
50 to 70, that's a staggering amount of data to be processing instantly. We're not just talking about your eyes and your mouth.
Oh no! We're mapping the microgeography of the face, the precise angle of your jawline, the exact curve of your brow bone, the ratio of your eye width to your nasal bridge, even the width of the philtrum above your lip. All these tiny measurements that, when you add them up, define what we consider conventional beauty and youth. The software reads all of that in a millisecond.
And after it reads those landmarks, it starts adjusting the proportions based on its algorithms. Which brings up the big question. What are these algorithms trained on? What standard are they pushing us toward?
Overwhelmingly, they're trained on enormous data sets, millions and millions of photos that reflect what the AI industry has decided are global beauty standards. This often uses things like generative adversarial networks, or GANs, which are designed to create hyper-realistic but totally fake images.
So they learn what perfect looks like and then try to make your face match that.
Precisely. The network learns to nudge your features toward an algorithmic average of perceived perfection. And that average is almost never neutral. It's usually skewed toward very specific, often Eurocentric ideals of symmetry, youth, and narrow features.
So the technology isn't just a fun little tool, it's prescriptive. It's basically handing you an aesthetic mandate.
It's deeply suggestive, yes. And you see it in the kinds of tools available. You have AI face reshaping tools that can subtly alter your underlying bone structure, not just your skin texture. And the real-time aspect is key. Live video filters are modifying your appearance constantly during a video call or a stream. The distortion never stops.
And you have those tools that let you blend your face with the celebrities, or these one-tap fixes for perfect proportions. By offering a digital solution for every single part of your appearance, the technology is implying that your natural self is just broken, and it needs this intervention to be complete.
Which leads right to the core psychological hit, the suggestion of the correct face. Because these tools are so good at what they do, and they're based on these standardized ideals, they create this really persuasive but non-human template. They don't just show you your face. They suggest the ideal face you're supposed to have.
And that creates a very powerful, very addictive feedback loop.
Hugely addictive. And the research shows this ideal is becoming the new default for so many people. In a lot of places, especially for younger users, the first time they see their own face through their phone's camera, it's after a filter has already been applied.
The camera is already augmenting reality from the jump.
That's the turning point. When the modified image becomes your default self-representation, your unmodified natural self is immediately rendered unacceptable. It suddenly looks flat or uneven or just unprepared. The standard has been set by the algorithm, and that standard is digital perfection.
And our brains, just being bombarded with these images, start to accept this new standard as normal.
Exactly, which sets the stage this constant, devastating internal comparison.
And that comparison, especially when it's our real self versus our own optimized self, that takes us straight into this world of curated identities and this deep psychological asymmetry that we're all exposed to.
Right, and to get that, you first have to appreciate just the sheer scale of the curation. It goes so far beyond your face. Everything you see online is curated now. How your relationships look, how clean your home is, how amazing your vacation was, even the emotion in your smile.
The moments are being captured for an external audience, not for an internal memory.
That's it, perfectly. The whole purpose of documenting your life has subtly shifted. It's no longer primarily about remembering a moment in its authentic, messy reality. It's about displaying it in its most optimized, aesthetically pleasing two-dimensional form. We are meticulously filtering out any sign of struggle, aging, imperfection, bad lighting,
Right.
anything real.
So if every individual is curating their own life like this, what's the takeaway for the person on the other end, just scrolling through thousands of these posts?
The collective result is a profoundly false cultural narrative. When you absorb this relentless stream of hundreds of these perfect images every single day, the unconscious conclusion your brain makes is that everyone else's life is just better, more radiant, more symmetrical, more effortlessly beautiful, and constantly happy.
You're seeing the highlight reel of millions of people all polished by algorithms to look like a magazine cover.
And we forget that a magazine cover isn't a real person. But the real psychological damage comes from the structure of the comparison itself. It's fundamentally broken.
You call it psychological asymmetry.
We do, and it's a burden our social brains were just never designed to handle. Think about it. You are constantly comparing your candid internal self, your raw, unedited, textured, maybe you're tired, maybe you're anxious, you're dealing with real life. You're comparing that self to their curated selves, which are always perfectly filtered, symmetrical, ideally lit, and only shown in moments of peak aesthetic and emotional joy.
It's a comparison you're designed to lose. You can't win when you bring your reality up against someone else's manufactured ideal.
You can't. Your real internal self will always come up short against their external optimized avatar. And being exposed to this day in and day out, it leads to these completely artificial expectations. Expectations we have for ourselves and that we project onto other people.
We start to believe, on some deep subconscious level, that beauty is supposed to be flawless, that happiness has to be constantly on display, that a good life is a life that looks perfectly symmetrical and ordered.
And this is why it's so important to just reassert reality
Ew.
loudly. Digital dishonesty actively hides these basic truths. Real faces have pores, they have texture, they have uneven tones. Real bodies are soft and have asymmetries and show the effects of gravity. Real lives have messy rooms and bad lighting and long periods of boredom and quiet struggles that nobody ever takes a picture of.
But the tools we use have convinced us that those fundamental human truths are actually flaws that need to be erased.
And that profound disconnect between the manufactured ideal and our physical reality is what sets the stage for the very real, demonstrable psychological harm the researchers are now tracking.
All right, let's bring in that evidence. Let's talk about the tangible impact this is having on self-esteem and body image.
We are well beyond just worrying about this anecdotally. This is a clinically established issue now. The data is consistent across major global studies, including research coming from the American Psychological Association. And these studies all point to some really clear and frankly troubling negative correlations.
So what are the headline findings? What's the direct link between this tech and negative mental health outcomes?
The biggest one is this powerful self-reinforcing loop. The more you use filters, the less satisfied you are with your actual physical appearance.
It creates a dependency.
A deep dependency. The more you use the tool to fix what you see as flaws, the more flawed your natural self appears in comparison, which just intensifies the feeling that you need the digital fix. It's a spiral.
And that spiral must have a huge impact on overall mental health, especially for younger people who are still figuring out who they are.
Absolutely. The studies show that individuals, particularly teens and young adults who are heavy users of these appearance-altering filters, also show significantly higher rates of generalized anxiety and, really importantly, higher rates of self-objectification.
Let's unpack that term, self-objectification. What does that actually mean here?
It means you start to see yourself from an outsider's perspective. Instead of experiencing your body as your own, as this vehicle for living your life, you start to see it as an object that needs to be constantly monitored and perfected for other people to look at.
So you're no longer asking, how do I feel? You're asking, how do I look?
How do I look to them? Right now, all the time. And that constant external watchfulness is exhausting. It's fundamentally corrosive to any kind of inner peace.
And the most dramatic, maybe the most terrifying outcome of this is what's being recognized clinically now. Body dysmorphia triggered by selfies. This is where the distress from that gap between the real you and the digital you becomes genuinely debilitating.
And we're seeing this distress actually show up in doctors' offices. Cosmetic surgeons have identified a very specific trend, and they even have a name for it: Snapchat dysmorphia.
That's a clinical term they're using.
Yes. It describes this surge in patients coming in and asking for surgery to make them look like their own filtered, digitally altered selfies. They bring in the manipulated photos as the goal. That's what they want to look like in real life.
Wow. That phrase, Snapchat dysmorphia, that just says it all. It's a stark measurement of how much the illusion has replaced reality as the standard of beauty.
And you can trace it right back to how our brains work. We are wired to adapt to what we see repeatedly. So the more of these digitally perfected, flawlessly symmetrical, poreless faces we see, whether it's celebrities or our own edited avatars, the more inadequate and imperfect real faces start to look by comparison.
Your brain's baseline for what's normal gets completely rewired.
It gets warped. It's replaced by an algorithmic standard that is biologically impossible for a human being to meet. And this leads, inevitably, to this state of psychological pain that we call comparative despair.
It's that feeling of just being fundamentally less than everything you see online.
Exactly. Even when you intellectually know the images aren't real, you're living in this chronic state of inadequacy, not because you failed to be real, but because you failed to measure up to an illusion you probably helped create. Digital dishonesty has become this universal 247 campaign that sets an impossible standard and then convinces us that meeting it is mandatory for our social survival.
It's a trap we set for ourselves.
Yeah.
And the internal pain it creates that never stays contained, does it? It always spills out and starts to affect our relationships. It fractures our social reality.
Which is the next critical piece. When the very foundation of the self you're presenting is compromised, when it's built on this digital dishonesty, then any connection you try to build on top of it is going to be unstable. It's going to be fragile.
The sources point to dating as being a huge casualty of this. When everyone is putting forward a perfectly optimized version of themselves, dating becomes a guessing game, a risk assessment.
It absolutely does. People are showing these highly refined, sometimes AI-enhanced versions of who they are. So the very first point of contact is based on a misleading image. It creates a deeply fragile environment for building any kind of trust.
The initial presentation is, by design, unreliable.
It is. And that first real-life meeting becomes this moment of truth, which is often full of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
You've been investing emotional energy in this idealized avatar, and now you're meeting a real three-dimensional person.
The unpredictability must be enormous.
It's huge. Authenticity, which should really be the bare minimum for intimacy, has become this rare prized luxury. The whole dating landscape is just saturated with avatars, which creates this feeling of superficiality and high emotional risk when the real person finally shows up.
And this pressure to perform, it's not just in dating. It seeps into our friendships, our social circles.
It really does. Friendships start to operate like performances for a wider audience.
That's a critical shift.
It is. When the reason you share a moment changes, when it's not about genuinely connecting over a shared experience, but about capturing something that is aesthetically worthy of being presented to the masses, the entire dynamic of the friendship is altered. You start prioritizing shared spectacle over shared, imperfect experience.
You're focused on performing, not relating.
And there's a really concerning social consequence that's tied to this relentless push for a polished presentation, which is the erosion of empathy.
How does that work?
Well, if every single person in your social feed appears flawless, constantly happy, and with no visible struggles, you're conditioned to forget that they're actually vulnerable human beings. The relentless perfection acts like a psychological shield. It makes it easier for us to distance ourselves from their potential pain.
Right. You look at the person with the perfect filter on the perfect vacation and you think their life is perfect, they don't have real problems, why should I extend my empathy to them?
The filter successfully hides the messy, struggling humanity that would normally trigger our compassion. It creates emotional distance. And this fundamentally changes how we communicate. The goal shifts to image-first communication. All our energy goes away from expressing our complex inner self, our real thoughts, our doubts, and it gets redirected entirely to just optimizing our external presentation.
So instead of connecting person to person, we're connecting avatar to avatar. The real human self gets left behind.
That's the outcome. Real, resilient relationships are built on vulnerability and messiness, the very things digital dishonesty is designed to erase. So when we only show up as our polished avatars, our relationships get weaker because the real foundation was never allowed to be seen, let alone built upon.
And all that social pain just loops right back to the individual, forcing that final painful stage of the identity fracture. Which brings us to the quiet erosion of self-acceptance and the full-blown identity crisis this can trigger.
This divergence, when it really takes hold, it's not subtle at all. When your digital self and your real self separate in a significant way, it becomes a true identity fracture. It's this incredibly painful split between who you authentically are and the idealized person you feel you have to pretend to be.
And living with that split creates these very specific, measurable anxieties that are they're everywhere in our culture now.
The symptoms are so consistent, people report feeling fundamentally unlike their own social media photos, which creates this huge cognitive dissonance, a
Yeah.
sense of being disconnected from your own image.
They often talk about actively avoiding mirrors that aren't filtered.
They do. Why? Because the contrast between the digital ideal they've come to expect and their physical reality is just too jarring. It can trigger real anxiety.
That avoidance is a rejection of your own physical self. You're living in a constant state of denial.
You are. And this shows up as acute anxiety in real-life social settings. This fear of being exposed, this stress that your true appearance will be revealed and judged as not good enough. And maybe the deepest shame comes from that feeling of deception when you meet someone new, a date, a friend, a coworker, who only knows the hyper-edited online version of you.
That shame must be completely exhausting. Every social interaction is weighed down by this fear of being found out, even if the lie was just a subtle filter.
And the most insidious part of this identity crisis is when you start to internalize the digital identity as the better version of you. That judgment is a continuous, severe attack on your real physical self. If the digital self is superior, then the real self is, by definition, deficient, substandard, in constant need of correction.
It locks you into this dynamic where you're endlessly trying to bridge an impossible gap, trying to force your real self to live up to a non-existent algorithmic ideal you can never reach.
Which creates the ultimate internal conflict. It's defined by two escalating fears. The one on the surface is social. I am not the person people think I am. That's the fear of exposure.
But there's a deeper one underneath that.
There is. The one that really drives the anxiety, the one that defines the true emotional burden of all this, is that profound existential question that this culture of perfection forces us to ask ourselves, what if the unedited me is not enough?
And that is the quiet erosion of self-acceptance. The idea that your worth is conditional, that it depends on achieving digital perfection, not on your inherent messy humanity.
It's incredibly destructive.
So if the problem is rooted in technology and these deep psychological cycles, then the solution has to be about intentionality, about setting boundaries and consciously recalibrating our relationship with our own image. Let's wrap up this deep dive by looking at how we can actually do that, how we reclaim authenticity and break this cycle.
I think the key thing to realize is that the answer isn't to just abandon technology entirely. For most people, that's just not practical. Reclaiming yourself requires a conscious choice to adopt boundaries, to be intentional, and to have a radical awareness within your digital life.
It's about taking back control, becoming the intentional user of the tool instead of letting the tool use you and define your reality.
Precisely. We have to fundamentally shift the relationship, and we can actually outline some actionable steps that can help promote what we should be striving for, which is digital honesty.
Okay, let's run through those. What are some practical things listeners can do to start aligning their outer portrayal with their inner truth?
First, a critical mental reframing of the technology itself. Use filters for fun, for creativity, for art. But never use them as a replacement for your identity or for reality. Treat them like a costume, a temporary digital mask, not a permanent upgrade to your actual self.
Second, we have to actively push back against the stream of perfection. We need to make a conscious effort to share imperfect moments sometimes.
Yes. Show the uneven lighting. Show the messy corner of your room. Show a genuine, unguarded emotion that doesn't fit the hyper-optimized ideal. It's about normalizing imperfection for yourself and for everyone else who sees it.
Third, and this is a big one, you have to curate what you consume. If your entire feed is just digitally perfected faces and bodies that make you feel bad about yourself, you are actively feeding that psychological machine.
So you have to consciously seek out and follow creators who are brave enough to show their unedited faces, their skin texture, their natural bodies. That is how you begin to reset your brain's visual baseline back toward actual human reality.
Controlling the input is controlling your self-perception.
It is. Fourth, Implement offline days. It doesn't have to be a permanent detox, but just intentional time away from the phone lens. It forces you to re-engage with the real world, with real connection, and most importantly, with your own image in an unfiltered mirror and your own thoughts without that rush for external validation.
And fifth is the ongoing practice of just self-awareness.
You have to learn to notice the exact moment when that comparative despair or self-objectification kicks in. The second you start to feel less than, just gently step back from the app. Identify what triggered that feeling and remind yourself of the illusion it's based on.
And finally, there's a critical question to ask yourself before you post anything.
It's a litmus test for digital honesty. Before you hit share, just ask yourself, does this represent me or does this represent the me I think other people want to see?
That question gets right to the heart of it. It clarifies your intention instantly. Are you trying to express yourself, or are you chasing approval based on a manufactured standard?
And ultimately, digital honesty isn't about total radical exposure or quitting the internet. It's just about achieving alignment, a state of integrity between who you are on the inside and what you show on the outside. It's remembering that the unfiltered human, the asymmetrical, textured, genuine you is not a flaw to be fixed. It's the resilient foundation of your identity.
We have this unprecedented level of control over our own appearance now, and that immense power comes with a profound responsibility.
And that responsibility isn't to chase this impossible algorithmic perfection. That's the definition of digital dishonesty. The real responsibility is to choose humanity, to choose texture, to choose truth.
Because digital dishonesty might give you a fleeting boost in how you look, but it's purely cosmetic. It rarely, if ever, improves how you genuinely feel about yourself or the real quality of your relationships.
It's a surface solution to a much deeper problem. And the final choice is ours, every single day. Authenticity is not a filter you can just apply with one tap. It is a choice that you have to actively and intentionally make over and over again.
Choosing honest faces, honest flaws, and honest lives is how we collectively stop feeding this false narrative of flawlessness. It's how we start building a digital world that is actually relatable and livable and truly connected. Because what the world desperately needs isn't more perfect avatars, it's more whole, genuinely human beings. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, let us know in the comments what really stood out to you in this conversation and if there's any related topic or new topic that you would like covered in a future video.